work hard without the stench of hardship. I was broke. Where do I even begin? I can't believe that I let things get to this point, but you don't really realize when things are getting worse, especially when you're sinking very, very gradually. It is currently my last few days of me being 30, and I am nowhere near where I envisioned myself to be. Not to say I haven't come far. Let me actually show you where I stayed when I had to move out of the place I was staying, and I was broke. This is the room. And that's the crappy little bed I stayed on. And that was the table that was on the side. And this was the kitchen that everyone had to share and use because that place had just people coming in and out and all different people. Everyone broke pretty much because, you could just tell from the state of everyone there. But because I come from being poor or hardship, whatever you want to call it, when the stench of it starts to come back, you don't really notice because it is familiar to you already. A lot has clearly changed because when I look at these photos, I don't feel too great when I look at them because they're not the best memory. And I'm clearly now in a very different situation to where I was just a few years ago. But why I'm mentioning this is actually because although I'm in a very different situation financially to where I was just a few years ago, what I started noticing about myself is that I started reverting back to leaning into hardship, like the manner in which I was working, although financially in a different situation. It was as though I was stuck in hardship. And what I mean by that is every day that I was working and supposedly progressing, I wasn't because I actually truly felt miserable. It's actually funny when you think about it because those photos that I just showed you, how I got myself out of that situation was by looking forward ahead, being resourceful with what I had, and just looking straight ahead at what I needed to do and charging forward. That's the simplest way to put it. I didn't have any doubt, I didn't have any concerns, I was just charging forward and getting what I needed to do done. There was no emotional disruption, and as the results started coming in, I was genuinely very much excited. And it was the excitement that kept moving me forward towards increasing revenue. And it worked because that's what I covered in my 0 to 100K in 3 months video. I obviously just hustled my way out of there and I was very excited to do so. And the fact that I was excited just kept pushing me forward to do more and do better. But then I reached a certain point of stagnation, and it was because I didn't do the things I needed to do in the manner in which I originally did them. I recently listened to the set of audio clips that actually explains this really well. I'm naturally not a very woo-woo person who's about manifestation, but in this video, how they kind of explain things were in a very practical and almost scientific manner, and it made sense to me. He was explaining that in order to get whatever it is you want in life, you need to be excited and move forward in a cheerful manner, expecting things to happen because you're excited, you know you can get yourself to that point. And somewhere along the way, I had started to work in a very begrudging manner because ultimately this was my first time learning to produce any kind of revenue properly, and I defaulted back into the manner that was as close to what I knew, which is what I meant by hardship, even though not being like that is actually what got me out of the situation in the first place. So I was listening to these audio clips and I realized that mentally I was going where I needed to go. Physically, I was doing the acts that I needed to be doing, taking the actions that I needed to be taking. But emotionally, I was going completely backwards. And it's funny because when you're not all aligned in one direction to charge forward, something is in misalignment. I don't know how to describe it specifically, but you feel blocked. I couldn't get through and pass that next threshold because I was stunting my own growth. And for someone who had experienced and knows exactly what it feels like to have hyper growth and accelerate really quickly, to then feel stumped that feels extremely, extremely terrible. And that feeling, I steeped in that for a very, very long time. And it was truly only after taking a step back and taking myself out of the situation for a little bit, listening to that audio clip, getting some perspective on the situation, that I realized that I was creating those obstacles for myself because I was not right emotionally. I was going backwards. So any small issue, instead of just being able to, on the spot, think of a solution, it would just send you down a rabbit hole. So actually, at the start of this year, I vowed to myself that I was going to change my life in 6 months. The first 2 months, I must say, was still very difficult because the old habits, the old patterns were still seeping into the new year, and I fell down multiple times. But by the time February was wrapping up, I realized this was happening, my attitude became better, and I just noticed an overall change in how I felt and how I was approaching my work. And honestly, I started feeling a lot better. And given this is my birthday month and it's my last few days of being 30, I wanted to make sure that I'm starting 31 off on the right foot, where I'm actually enjoying the work I'm doing things in a manner which is progressive, but something I want to keep coming back to and be excited about, rather than approach everything in a begrudging manner with that same mentality of hardship, which I don't want to do anymore. I want to stay as far away from that as possible because you can work hard without the stench of hardship. So we're going to start off 31 in a new celebratory location.
You know it's automatic. Tell Trev leak the hard drive, I'm ever caught in traffic. Don't let a label milk my name, just get my mom to cash this.
You know what I did was actually like a key characteristic of someone who has never made money before, and then they start running a company and they default back into patterns that they shouldn't be leaning back into. And now I notice you typically come across this when, for example, you start not thinking of the risks involved. Usually when you're starting a company and you start moving forward and you're excited, you have this drive, you keep charging forward, your foot is off the pedal, and then certain people, like typically, I don't know, when they reach a specific threshold, like they become a millionaire or whatever you want to call it, they start reverting back to the mentality they had before they came across this money. They start getting extremely tired and concerned and fearful, and instead of just charging forward to get the things that they need to do done and achieve the results that they need to achieve, and they're purely approaching this from a manner in which they're excited and ready to charge forward and like knock down doors, they revert. And that's kind of like what I did, and it's just so typical of someone to do this when it's their first round of doing it. And I knew I could have freaking prevented it. It's just I was listening to the wrong people. And I guess in some ways I needed to go through it, because now that I've gone through it once and it was freaking atrocious, I'm not freaking doing it again. Never again. And that probably sounds like absolute gibberish. So let me give you a clear example. As soon as I started making money, I had influence from other people telling me, go buy a house, it's safer to buy a house, it's safer to do this is low risk. Basically just feeling scared, fearful, and not in an attitude where you're just charging forward and excited to get shit done. Because I got influence, I didn't end up charging forward in the direction of just like building my company and making sure the revenue's increasing and doing that in an exciting manner, which is me. That's who I am as a person, and that's what I want to do. But because I had ended up purchasing a home and feeling extremely stagnant, I was staying in one place and just working on the company behind the scenes. Everything felt very much, I don't know how else to say it other than like a homey atmosphere, which is just not who I am as a person. And it just felt slow and stagnant, and I felt like all these obstacles were there in front of me when it wasn't really anything. It was just emotionally, I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing, and the fact that I was doing that, it just like fucked me up mentally. Now that I've noticed that, and I'm starting to do what I should be doing, which is whatever helps me ensure that I'm in the right state of mind, I'm in the right mind frame, I'm charging forward with the right attitude, I am progressing in the goals that I've set out for myself, is really freaking exciting for me. Now I feel different. So the moral of the extremely unnecessarily painful experience is that you should freaking listen to your instincts. And if you don't have the ability yet to listen to your own instincts, you probably just haven't made enough mistakes, because once you do, you'll know exactly what you should and shouldn't be doing. Now every time I'm making a decision, I'm very, very conscious of which direction to send it.
Once I checked the Sonics, bank accounts emptied out, I had to thug it out. Always had a way to make it work and find another route. If they don't credit me, I'm checking out. These raps are just the thoughts I always stress about. My only way to let them out.
Morning. I have a podcast interview that I need to do today with a guest that is coming on the show. I mean, one of the goals I'd set for this year is to launch a podcast, which we have, and I guess in the background, something I need to be conscious of, like what I talked about yesterday, is just making sure I'm doing everything in a fun manner, because I really ended up grinding myself to the bone last year and the year before that, perhaps even the year before that, and yeah, I just felt like I wasn't progressing because I was, I don't know, doing things in such a manner that felt hard and difficult. And of course you're going to work hard, but you don't need it to reflect hardship, which is what I ended up falling back into. So I'm hoping that I practice more this year about enjoying things as I'm doing them, which is kind of why I'm also here, because I'm trying to test it out and see how good I'll be at working whilst being on the go. So balancing out living my life in a way, and then also progressing and moving ahead, because how I was working prior and just grinding away, although helpful in terms of, because how I was working prior, I don't know, it wasn't working for me.
So I was interested in this because I know on your TikTok you do a lot of this like first-person storytelling.
Yeah. Even with guests, I notice sometimes when we're chatting, like I recently interviewed 2 people, which I normally don't do.
Great. Well, all that sounds awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Juliana, for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to seeing the trailer.
What an awesome founder. Julia was great to interview. She's a founder and CEO of Coupling. So that interview went really well. I made a few mistakes here and there, as per usual. I'm still trying to get used to the process. Obviously, it's still new to me, but it went great. I have another interview tomorrow that I need to do with the CEO and founder of Acquire.com. I think previously it used to be called MicroAcquire, Andrew Gzdecki. So I'll need to
Get my
prepare for
mom
that.
the cash is a new era, same pro, and I want all the static. I've been killing since some tours were static. Even before we in the basement and recorded matches.
I just finished off some of the prep that I needed to do for a different podcast episode. So I'm going to try to go out and live my life, because that's something I haven't done for far, far too long. I've always kind of worked in a manner that's very forceful, and it hasn't been healthy. Like, if you saw some of my photos from last year or sometime, maybe during the middle of last year, I had gained a significant amount of weight, significant in my books. I'd never seen myself that heavy before, which, I mean, 6 kilograms is not that heavy, but when you already are naturally quite stable in terms of your weight, typically, I never steer too far from it, and then all of a sudden, you're constantly stressed, you're constantly working, you're constantly sitting down, you're doing it begrudgingly, you're stuck in one area, you're stuck in the office, you'll notice that, like, it's just not healthy, and I could see it on my face. Obviously it was getting very swollen. I was feeling extremely, extremely tired no matter what I did. As soon as I ate any kind of carbs, I'd be knocked out at lunchtime, and then I switched to almost like a purely high protein diet, and then I don't even want to call it diet, but just meals, and it became a lot better, but I still would get tired. But then I noticed afterwards it was my attitude all along, because once I started working in a manner that was a little bit healthier, and my relationship with work was not geared towards hardship, and more so I'm doing what I need to do to get it done, but I also need to friggin' live my life. Instead of like grinding it every day and kind of forcing doors open, just like as though I was still extremely poor. It's kind of hard to express this, because it's not that you shouldn't be doing that. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's just, I was doing it so begrudgingly emotionally that I just was not in the right state. And it made me exhausted because it was draining me emotionally. I was just constantly tired, even with the high protein meals. And I figured that out because a few weeks ago I ate a whole bunch of carbs and I felt fine. So it wasn't just the food, although eating like high protein has definitely helped me a lot more. The most significant one that changed everything was actually my mood and making sure I have an okay relationship with how I work, because I tend to be someone who leans towards grinding and hustling, even if that is at the detriment of myself. So we're trying to do things differently.
When I get in, I take a shower, read a book and feel empowered. Smoking on that sour got me counting down the hours, thinking of all the shit that they could do but won't allow us. Then I realized they all some fucking cowards. The world is ours. Me and my brother twin like the towers, and we want it now, never later. No more favors done with all these traitors who be haters on the low. They just hate to see you grow, so I'd rather be alone in my zone writing poems.
I managed to unpack just about everything, and it just kind of got me thinking that as much as the last couple of years have been difficult and I've just been grinding away and not really going anywhere, unlike what I just showed in the video, but it's kind of necessary. The fact that you kind of go through and realize that the manner in which your work is not working, like, you kind of have to go through it to understand that you can't continue on that trajectory. I feel like it's necessary because in a way, at the beginning, you're going to compromise your sleep, your health, everything about you. But then after a while, you realize it's not sustainable. If you're not taking care of yourself, your business can't run itself, the company can't run itself, your team relies on you. All those different factors make you realize that it's not sustainable to do things in that manner. So I'm rewiring myself and learning to be better. I mean, definitely being able to take yourself out of the situation that you're currently in gives you a lot of retrospective thoughts on how to better run your company. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about how I'm going to approach things from now on. And it's always when you take yourself out of the situation you're in, you're able to see things at a much higher level and figure out what you need to make sure you're working on the company rather than being in the company and working on the smaller minuscule details that don't really move the needle. So some time away from it is certainly necessary at points, which I was never really willing to do and kept me grinding away at the smaller details. So I'm glad this trip happened. I'm excited for the many other trips that I'm going to be planning to make sure that I'm taking these business retreats to focus on what I need to be focusing on. So excited for the rest of 2025 ahead.